The plasma rounds tore through the observation deck's reinforced glass 3 seconds before Commander Alexei Volkov realized the defense perimeter had collapsed. He dropped behind the command console as molten fragments rained down, his rifle already tracking movement through the smoke. 12 hours ago, he'd been ordered to hold Research Station Kepler 9 for evacuation. 7 hours ago, the last transport had left without him. 3 minutes ago, his squad had stopped answering comms. Central, this is Volkov. Perimeter breach, East Quadrant. All units silent. Requesting immediate. Static swallowed his transmission. The Valkyrie swarm moved like liquid shadow through the shattered viewport, their chitinous armor reflecting emergency lights and nauseating patterns. He counted 17 before stopping. Mathematics wouldn't save him now. His neural implant flickered. One message, 2 words, sent 40 minutes earlier. Stay hidden. The timestamp carried his daughter's encryption signature. Sarah. 8 years old. Somewhere in the research wing's panic room, if the automated lockdown had worked. If she'd listened. If she'd stayed quiet. The first Valkyrie warrior rounded the console. Volkov's first shot caught it between the thorax segments, the second destroyed its primary visual cluster. It collapsed with a shriek that resonated through his bones, chemical markers flooding the air. Challenge. Territory. Kill. 3 more appeared. He moved. Muscle memory guided him through the weapon's locker, fingers finding the plasma charges by touch while his eyes tracked movement. The station's layout existed in his mind like a second language, every corridor, every vent, every structural weakness. He'd walked these halls daily for 16 months, hand in hand with a child who asked too many questions and noticed too much. The research wing entrance was sealed. Override panel, destroyed. Manual release, jammed. Volkov placed charges on the door's stress points while plasma fire scorched the walls behind him. The mathematics were elegant. The Valkyrie warrior class hunted by sound and thermal signature, but their sensory organs processed information 0.4 seconds slower than human neural response. Small window. Enough. He triggered the charges and dove through before the debris settled. The panic room door stood intact at the corridor's end, its haptic display showing green. Locked from inside. Occupied. Relief lasted exactly 1 heartbeat. Between him and that door, 14 Valkyrie, 2 warrior class, 12 soldier variants. They moved with coordinated precision, filling the corridor like a living barrier. Behind them, something larger shifted in the darkness. The atmospheric sensors spiked, chemical markers he didn't recognize, pheromones that made his threat assessment systems scream warnings. Sarah, he whispered into his dead calm. If you can hear this, stay quiet. Stay hidden. Don't open the door. Don't. Movement caught his peripheral vision. The observation gallery overlooked this corridor through armored glass designed to withstand decompression events. Something stood there, watching. Not Valkyrie. The silhouette was wrong, too tall, too deliberate. The emergency lighting painted it in crimson shadows, but he could see enough. Robes that seemed to absorb light. A crown of organic material that pulsed with bioluminescence. Eyes that tracked his every movement with analytical precision. The Matriarch. Intelligence had briefed them on the Valkyrie command structure during initial deployment. Warriors obeyed queens. Queens obeyed matriarchs. Matriarchs decided which species deserved extinction. She raised one elegant appendage, and the swarm stopped advancing. Not retreating. Waiting. The gesture carried weight, authority that transcended species. Volkov felt it in his chest like pressure change before a storm. This wasn't random violence. This was judgment. The panic room's external speaker crackled. Daddy? Everything stopped. The Valkyrie warriors cocked their heads in unison, processing the sound. The matriarch leaned forward, her crown's bioluminescence intensifying. Volkov felt his heart try to hammer through his ribs. Sarah, no. Protocols. Remember protocols. They're scared, Daddy. Can't you hear them? They're so scared. The impossible statement hung in recycled air. Volkov's neural implant parsed it twice, searching for sense in nonsense. The Valkyrie had annihilated 17 human colonies in 2 years. Fear wasn't in their behavioral profile. Mercy was a concept they demonstrated precisely zero understanding of. Sarah, listen very carefully. Stay inside. Lock the she's calling them. The big one. She's calling and calling, but nobody answers. She thinks everyone is dead. The matriarch's posture shifted. Her crown flared with patterns Volkov's implant couldn't decode. The nearest warrior made a sound like tearing metal mixed with wine through canyon stone. Question. Confusion. Something else. How? Volkov started, but Sarah was still talking, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when explaining something obvious to adults who wouldn't understand. Her children went through the wrong door. They weren't supposed to be here. Now she can't find them and she's scared we hurt them and she's going to hurt everyone because that's what scared mothers do. Volkov's weapon tracked the nearest warrior on instinct, but his mind was racing through implications. The research wing. Dr. Yamoto's xenobiology lab. The containment breach that triggered this entire catastrophe hadn't been an attack. It had been. The panic room door hissed open. Sarah and O. But his daughter was already stepping into the corridor, her small form wrapped in an emergency thermal blanket, her face smudged with dried tears and recycled air condensation. She looked up at the matriarch in the observation gallery with eyes that held no fear, only the determined certainty of a child who'd decided the adults were handling things wrong. I know where they are, Sarah said, her voice clear in the sudden silence. I can show you. But you have to promise not to hurt my daddy. The matriarch descended the observation gallery stairs with movements that suggested ceremony, ritual, something beyond simple locomotion. Each step was deliberate, measured. The warriors parted for her, creating a corridor of living weapons. She was massive up close, easily 3 meters tall, her robes revealing glimpses of exoskeleton that seemed to shift between organic and crystalline states. Her crown pulsed with new patterns, faster, more complex. Volkov moved to intercept, rifle raised. Stay away from her. The nearest warrior tensed. The matriarch raised one appendage, a gesture of restraint directed at her own forces. She studied Volkov with eyes that reflected alien intelligence, then turned that same analytical gaze on Sarah. For 7 endless seconds, nothing moved except the bioluminescent patterns racing across the matriarch's crown. Sarah pointed down the corridor, toward the xenobiology lab. The blue door. Dr. Yamoto put them in the quiet room because they were sick. She was trying to help them, but then, the alarm started and everyone ran away and she forgot to open the door back up. Sarah, you can't know. But Volkov's implant was already accessing station logs, pulling Dr. Yamoto's final entries. Xenobiological specimens, genus unknown, acquired from Kepler-9's indigenous fauna caves. Exhibiting distress behaviors. Isolated for observation. Timestamp, 3 hours before the Valkyrie arrived. Before the swarm tore through defensive positions that should have held for days. The matriarch moved past Volkov like he was furniture, her attention fixed on Sarah. The warriors flowed with her, maintaining formation. Volkov fell in behind, rifle trained on the matriarch's center mass, knowing the shot would kill him before he finished pulling the trigger, unable to do anything else. The xenobiology lab's doors had been sealed by emergency protocols. The matriarch examined them for exactly 2 seconds before her warriors tore through reinforced steel like paper. Inside, the containment room's transparent aluminum showed 3 small forms huddled in the corner. They were juvenile Valkyrie, their armor still soft and mottled, their crown structures barely developed. One was injured, its thorax marked by burns consistent with human plasma weapons. The sound the matriarch made defied translation. Volkov's neural implant classified it as vocalization, maternal distress, threat display, all simultaneously. She moved to the containment controls, appendages dancing across the interface with surprising dexterity. The door cycled open. The juveniles rushed to her, their own crowns pulsing in patterns that matched hers, establishing resonance that made Volkov's teeth ache. Sarah watched with the same focused intensity she applied to everything that captured her interest. See? They're okay. The doctor was helping them. The matriarch's crown shifted to darker patterns. She turned slowly, her gaze moving from the juveniles to Sarah to Volkov to the destroyed laboratory around them. Assessment. Calculation. Decision. Your species imprisoned my children. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, translated through technology Volkov's implant couldn't identify. Hurt them. To help them, Sarah said before Volkov could respond. Dr. Yamato was nice. She helped me when I had a fever. She wouldn't hurt anyone unless they were sick and needed medicine. She used weapons. The matriarch's appendage gestured to the burn mark on the juvenile's carapace. That was me. Volkov stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the matriarch. When your forces breached the lab, I engaged without confirming targets. I saw movement, I fired. The containment protocol called for neutralization of any xenobiological specimens during enemy attack. The words tasted like ash. I wounded your child while trying to protect mine. The silence that followed felt geological in scope. The matriarch's crown pulsed through patterns that grew increasingly complex, faster, building towards something. The warriors tensed. Volkov's finger rested on the trigger, knowing it wouldn't matter, unable to let go. You defend your offspring, the matriarch finally said. This is understood. Expected. But you fired on mine. Yes. And your offspring opened the door when all tactical logic demanded she remain hidden. The crown's patterns shifted. To return mine to me. Yes. Explain this contradiction. Volkov felt Sarah's hand slip into his, small and warm and trusting. Because she's human. We're contradictions. We fight and we heal. We hurt and we help. We're capable of both, usually at the worst possible times. The matriarch regarded them with that alien analytical gaze. Your species is dangerous. Unpredictable. The colonies we cleansed exhibited only the first trait. Your offspring exhibits both. This suggests complexity. We're all complex, Sarah said quietly. You were scared. We were scared. Everybody got hurt because everybody was scared at the same time. The juvenile with the burn mark moved closer, its crown pulsing with tentative patterns. It stopped an arm's length from Sarah, head tilted in posture Volkov's implant labeled as curiosity. Sarah released his hand and stepped forward. Volkov's training screamed at him to stop her, to grab her, to put himself between her and threat. He stayed still. Sarah reached out slowly, palm up, the universal gesture of non-aggression that apparently transcended species. The juvenile extended one delicate appendage, touched her hand with surprising gentleness. Its crown flared with patterns that seemed brighter, warmer than before. The matriarch watched this exchange with intensity that made the air feel heavy. You understand we cannot allow your species to continue its expansion. You are too dangerous, too chaotic. The colonies died to prevent future conflict. Then my daughter dies, Volkov said flatly. Here. Now. Because I won't let you take her, and I can't stop you. So we all make the same choice, protect our children at the cost of everything else. How is that different from what you're condemning us for? It is not different. That is the problem. Sarah looked up at the matriarch, her hands still connected to the juvenile. My teacher says problems are just puzzles we haven't solved yet. Maybe we're all trying to solve the wrong puzzle. Explain. You want your kids safe. My dad wants me safe. Everyone wants their kids safe. That's not a problem. That's the same thing. The problem is we keep trying to make everyone else go away instead of making enough space for everyone's kids. The observation gallery's remaining glass shattered. Volkov spun, rifle tracking automatically, threat assessment systems identifying the new arrival before his conscious mind processed what he was seeing. The queen was larger than the matriarch, her crown a monument of crystalline structures that pulsed with power that made emergency lighting flicker. Her armor bore patterns that suggested countless battles, and the warriors that poured through the breach behind her moved with precision that spoke of elite training. She descended on the laboratory with the inevitability of avalanche, her presence filling the space with chemical markers that screamed dominance, authority, violence. The matriarch's posture shifted, not submission, but acknowledgement of hierarchy. The queen's crown flared, patterns racing across its surface in sequences that Volkov's implant couldn't begin to translate. The matriarch responded with her own patterns, gestures, vocalizations that carried weight of argument, explanation, defense. Volkov pulled Sarah behind him. The queen's attention snapped to them with predator focus. She moved forward, and the matriarch intercepted, not blocking, but standing between, her own crown pulsing with patterns that seemed urgent, pleading. The queen paused. Her massive head tilted, studying the matriarch, then the juveniles, then Sarah and Volkov. The warriors around her tensed, weapons appendages extending in preparation for violence that felt inevitable. "She's asking what happened," Sarah whispered. "She's really, really angry." "Stay behind me," Volkov ordered, but Sarah was already stepping around him, still holding the juvenile's appendage, pulling it with her into the queen's line of sight. "Your children were lost," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her knees that Volkov could see. "Dr. Yamato found them and tried to help them. Then, everybody got scared and started fighting and they got trapped. But they're okay now. See? They're okay." The injured juvenile moved to its parent, its crown pulsing with patterns that matched the queen's, establishing resonance. The other two followed, surrounding the queen, their smaller crowns creating harmonics with hers. The chemical markers in the air shifted. Volkov's implant tagged them as familial recognition, relief, residual distress. The queen's attention returned to Sarah. One massive appendage extended, and Volkov's world narrowed to that single movement, his finger tightening on the trigger, knowing it wouldn't matter, knowing he'd try anyway. The appendage touched Sarah's head with impossible gentleness. The queen's crown shifted to patterns that seemed softer, contemplative. She made a sound that resonated through Volkov's chest, then turned to the matriarch. The exchange that followed was brief, complex, carrying weight of decision. The queen straightened to her full height. "This one saved my children. This creates obligation. Debt. Your species does not understand such things." "We understand," Volkov said. "We just express it differently. Your military destroyed 17 colonies. Millions of my kind. What expression is this? Defense. Your swarms attacked our outer settlements without warning, without communication. We fought back. Because you invaded breeding territories. Established colonies on sacred grounds. Contaminated waters where our young mature." Volkov's implant pulled up colonial survey data, overlaying it with the star charts of Valkyrie attacks. The pattern was there, obvious in retrospect, invisible during expansion. Every human colony established in the last 3 years overlapped with what the data suggested were Valkyrie breeding grounds, maturation sites, nursery territories. "We didn't know," he said, the words feeling inadequate. "Ignorance is not innocence. Your expansion threatens our survival. This is understood by the collective. The consensus was extermination." The matriarch added. "Before this small one demonstrated your species' complexity. Before she chose to return our young rather than using them as bargaining tools. Before she showed us contradiction, violence, and compassion existing simultaneously." The queen's crown pulsed. "One child's choice does not redeem a species." "No," Sarah said quietly. "But maybe it's a start. Maybe everyone can stop being scared long enough to talk instead of fight. Your colonies will not withdraw. Your military will not cease expansion. One conversation cannot undo territorial conflicts that span decades of preparation." "Then we're all going to die," Volkov said. "Your swarms will keep attacking. Our fleets will keep defending. Children on both sides will keep losing parents until there's nothing left worth fighting for. Or we try something different. What could possibly?" The station's emergency systems erupted with warnings. Volkov's neural implant parsed the data instantly. Human fleet signatures, 7 ships, battlecruiser class, entering system at combat velocity. ETA 40 minutes. The cavalry was finally arriving, late enough to matter, early enough to destroy any chance of something better than mutual annihilation. The Queen's warriors responded to chemical signals Volkov couldn't detect, formations shifting to defensive patterns. The Matriarch's crown flared with urgent patterns. Sarah's hand found Volkov's again, squeezing tight. "They're going to fight," she whispered. "Everyone's going to fight again, and it's going to be bad." The Queen turned to the Matriarch. "We must withdraw. The collective must be warned. The fleet will interpret our presence as contact them." Volkov interrupted. "The fleet. Tell them what happened here. Tell them your children were lost, then found. Tell them we're talking instead of dying for the first time in 3 years. Tell them to hold position while we figure this out. They will not listen to you. You are one commander in one station. You have no authority to negotiate." "No. But I have a daughter who just changed everything by being brave enough to choose compassion over protocol. That's got to count for something." The Queen studied him with that alien analytical gaze. "If your fleet attacks while we negotiate, it will be seen as deception. Betrayal. The consequence will be total war. Then we don't have time to debate. Sarah, I need you to record a message. Command protocols, full spectrum broadcast, authenticated on my signature. Can you do that?" His daughter nodded, pulling up the station's communication interface with practiced ease. She'd watched him do this 100 times, asked questions about every step, remembered everything. She configured the systems while Volkov composed words that would either save humanity or condemn it. "All human vessels, this is Commander Alexei Volkov, Research Station Kepler 9. I am invoking emergency first contact protocols under Article 77 of the Colonial Defense Charter. A Valkyrie diplomatic delegation is currently present at this station under temporary ceasefire. Casualties have occurred on both sides due to mutual misunderstanding of territorial boundaries and defensive responses. However, a peaceful resolution is now possible. I am requesting immediate cessation of hostile action and deployment of diplomatic personnel to negotiate terms. Repeat, do not engage. Do not engage. First contact protocols are in effect. Volkov out." He transmitted it on every frequency, tagged with authentications that would reach Fleet Command whether they wanted to hear it or not. The Queen watched this with her crown pulsing patterns that seemed almost approving. "This will buy time," she said. "Perhaps an hour. Perhaps less. Your commanders will demand proof of our intentions. Evidence that this is not deception. Then we give them proof." Volkov turned to the Matriarch. "You said Sarah's choice demonstrated complexity. Show them that choice matters on your side too. Send a transmission to your collective. Tell them the same thing I just told my fleet. Tell them one human child returned your young when she could have used them as shields. Tell them we're capable of being better than our worst moments." The Matriarch's crown shifted through patterns that suggested consideration, debate, decision. The collective does not respond to individual appeals. Consensus is reached through, "I don't care about your political structures." Volkov cut in. "I care about my daughter living long enough to see her 9th birthday. I care about your children growing up instead of dying in pointless battles. Make them understand that. Make them feel what you felt when Sarah opened that door." The silence stretched long enough for Volkov to count 15 heartbeats. The Queen and Matriarch exchanged patterns, chemical signals, physical gestures that carried layers of meaning his implant couldn't decode. Finally, the Matriarch approached the communication console, her appendages interfacing with the technology in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The transmission she sent resonated through frequencies that made Volkov's teeth ache. His implant tried to translate, gave up, provided only approximations. Children lost. Children found. Human offspring chose return over advantage. Demonstrated capacity for unexpected compassion. Request consensus review. Request delay of cleansing protocols. Request time for alternative assessment. The response came within seconds, thousands of voices speaking simultaneously, overlapping, creating harmonics that suggested vast collective intelligence processing new information in real time. Volkov couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the debate, the conflict, the gradual shift from certainty to doubt. Sarah watched the exchange with eyes that held too much understanding for 8 years old. They're arguing. Some want to attack anyway. But some are listening. Some are thinking maybe we're not all the same. Which side is winning? Volkov asked. Neither. They're all scared. Just like us. The human fleet transmitted acknowledgement of Volkov's message, along with demands for verification, proof of Valkyrie intentions, strategic assessment, and about 17 other requirements that would take hours to fulfill. Fleet Commander Hassan's voice carried the weight of someone who knew they were making decisions that would echo through history. Commander Volkov, acknowledge authentication. What is your tactical assessment of Valkyrie force disposition and hostile intent? Volkov looked at the Queen, at the Matriarch, at the juveniles clustered together with their crowns pulsing in synchronized patterns. At Sarah standing between species that had spent 3 years trying to annihilate each other, her hands still connected to the injured juvenile. My assessment is that we've been fighting the wrong war, sir. Recommend immediate deployment of xenolinguistic specialists and diplomatic personnel. Recommend establishing neutral ground for negotiations. And recommend we stop thinking about this as hostile force disposition and start thinking about it as 2 species that both made catastrophic mistakes based on incomplete information. The pause that followed felt eternal. When Hassan spoke again, his voice carried notes of disbelief, hope, and the kind of exhaustion that came from commanding too many battles. That's a hell of a recommendation, Commander. I hope you know what you're doing. I don't, sir. But my daughter does. And right now, that's the best option we've got. The Queen's crown flared with new patterns. Your commanders doubt. Your fleet maintains attack posture. How can negotiation proceed while weapons remain armed? The same way we're standing here talking instead of killing each other, Volkov said. Carefully. Honestly. With the understanding that trust takes time to build and seconds to destroy. Your collective has the same doubts. Your forces maintain the same posture. We're both standing on the edge of something unprecedented. We either jump together or we fall separately. The matriarch moved closer to Sarah, her massive form somehow non-threatening despite its size. Your offspring speaks of space for all children. This requires territory, resources, breeding grounds that do not overlap. Your expansion conflicts with our survival needs. Then we map it out, Volkov said. Every breeding ground, every maturation site, every territory that's critical to your species' continuation. We avoid those areas. We establish buffer zones. We find space that works for both species. And when your population grows? When expansion pressure resumes? We solve that problem when we reach it. Together. Right now, we solve the immediate problem, stopping the killing long enough to realize we don't have to be enemies. Sarah tugged on Volkov's sleeve. Dad? The juvenile wants to show you something. The injured Valkyrie approached, its movements tentative but deliberate. Its crown pulsed with patterns that Volkov's implant tagged as communication attempt, cross-species contact, something unprecedented in the behavioral database. It extended one appendage, touched Volkov's hand, and his implant suddenly, flooded with data, not language, not images, but pure emotion translated through chemical markers his body shouldn't have been able to process. Fear. Confusion. Pain. Then warmth. Safety. Gratitude. The juvenile's crown showed patterns that matched Sarah's when she'd opened the panic room door. Recognition. Understanding. The realization that not all unknowns were threats. Volkov felt something break open in his chest. 3 years of war. 17 colonies. Millions dead on both sides. And the answer had been standing in a panic room with his daughter, waiting for someone to be brave enough to choose differently. The Queen approached, her massive form casting shadows that should have been threatening but somehow weren't. My offspring shows you what words cannot convey. We are not so different. We protect our young. We fear the unknown. We fight when we cannot flee. Your species mirrors ours in ways that make this conflict inevitable and unnecessary simultaneously. Then, let's make it unnecessary, Volkov said. Let's choose the harder path. The matriarch's crown pulsed with patterns that seemed almost like approval. The collective is debating. The consensus is uncertain. This has never occurred in our recorded history, a potential ending to conflict through mutual understanding rather than total victory. First time for everything, Sarah said brightly, then looked up at the Queen. Are your children going to be okay? The one I touched felt hurt. Not outside hurt. Inside hurt. Like being scared for a really long time. The Queen's crown shifted to patterns that even Volkov's limited understanding recognized as maternal concern. They will heal. Time. Safety. The knowledge that they are protected. This is what all children require. Yeah, Sarah said softly. My dad says the same thing. He gets scared too, when he has to do hard things. But he does them anyway because that's what keeps me safe. I think that's what you're doing too. The station sensors registered Valkyrie vessels entering the system, massive hive ships that dwarfed the human fleet. Volkov's threat assessment systems should have been screaming. Instead, he watched his daughter talking with the Queen about fear and duty and doing hard things, and felt something shift in the air. The chemical markers changed. The warriors' postures relaxed fractionally. The Queen's crown pulsed with new patterns. The collective has reached preliminary consensus, the Matriarch announced. Temporary cessation of hostile action. Neutral ground negotiations. Exchange of territorial data. Monitored communication while trust is established. This is unprecedented. This is terrifying. This is possible because your offspring demonstrated that individual choice can influence collective decision. Fleet Commander Hassan's voice crackled through the calm. Commander Volkov, we have multiple Valkyrie capital ships in system. Our tactical position is compromised. Requesting immediate clarification on negotiation status. Negotiations are proceeding, sir. Both sides are scared. Both sides are armed. Both sides are choosing to talk instead of fight. Recommend maintaining current position but holding fire. Let's give peace the same chance we've been giving war for the past 3 years. The Queen moved to the communication console, interfacing with it through methods Volkov's implant suggested were psionic, technological, and biological simultaneously. Her crown pulsed with complex patterns as she transmitted something to both the Valkyrie collective and the human fleet, images, chemical markers, emotional resonance that transcended language barriers. Volkov's implant translated fragments. Offspring returned. Human demonstrated unexpected capacity. Conflict based on misunderstanding. Territory negotiable. Survival possible for both species. Choose different path. Choose now. The responses came simultaneously, human and Valkyrie both, transmitted in their own languages but carrying the same weight. Cautious acknowledgement. Demands for verification. Slow, uncertain agreement to try something that had never worked before because no one had been desperate enough or brave enough to actually commit to it. Sarah sat down on the laboratory floor, suddenly, looking every bit the exhausted 8-year-old who'd been through more trauma than anyone should face. The juvenile curled up beside her, its crown pulsing with gentle patterns. The Queen watched this with attention that felt like gravitational force. Your offspring is remarkable, she said to Volkov. She will be remembered in both our histories. She just wants everyone to stop being scared, Volkov replied. Turns out that's harder than winning wars. The matriarch approached them, her robes settling around her like ceremony concluding. The difficult work begins now. Mapping territories. Establishing protocols. Learning to exist in proximity without violence. This will take generations. Then we better start now, Volkov said. Before anyone decides the old way was easier. The station's sensors registered both fleets pulling back to safe distance, not retreating, but giving space for something unprecedented to take root. Volkov sent status updates to command, received acknowledgments that carried notes of disbelief, hope, terror at the implications. The Queen transmitted to her collective, received responses that his implant couldn't fully translate, but suggested similar emotional complexity. Sarah looked up at her father, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Are we safe now?" "For now," Volkov said honestly. "This is fragile. This could break with one wrong move. But we're trying. That's more than we had an hour ago." The juvenile's crown touched Sarah's hand, pulsing with patterns that suggested agreement, gratitude, hope. The Queen made a sound that resonated through Volkov's chest, not words, but acknowledgement. Recognition. The kind of respect that transcended species barriers. Outside the shattered viewport, human and Valkyrie ships maintained careful distance, weapons armed but not firing. Hundreds of thousands of lives balanced on this moment, waiting to see if peace was possible, or if war was inevitable. Volkov held his daughter close, watching the stars, feeling the weight of every decision that had led here. Every choice that had brought them to this precise moment where everything could change or collapse back into familiar violence. Sarah's breathing slowed, sleep claiming her despite everything. The juvenile's crown dimmed to gentle pulses, matching her rhythm. The Queen observed this with her massive head tilted in posture that suggested contemplation, assessment, the kind of decision that echoed through collective consciousness. "We will try," she finally said. "For our children. For yours. For the possibility that something better exists than endless war. We will try. That's all anyone can ask," Volkov replied. The matriarch's crown pulsed with patterns that seemed almost like hope. "The universe is large. Perhaps large enough for all children to grow safely. We shall discover this together." Dawn broke over Research Station Kepler 9, painting the destroyed observatory in shades of amber and gold. Two fleets maintained careful position against the stars. Two species began the slow, terrifying work of learning to coexist. One exhausted commander held his sleeping daughter while a Valkyrie queen stood guard, and for the first time in 3 years, the future held something other than certainty of destruction. It held possibility. It held hope. It held the fragile promise that sometimes, when everything else failed, one child's choice to be brave could change everything.